Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam of Well Salmon.
So, Sam, you were just out in LA. You're getting over the jet lag. Oh, that's probably not all that bad. It's not as bad as me flying out to the West Coast. It messes me up for like a week.
I'm so used to bouncing back and forth between here and the West Coast over the last couple of years that the 3-hour time difference really doesn't seem to make much of a difference anymore.
All right, so I'm just weak. That's all. But let's talk about cars first and what we're driving. And so this week you were in the 2019 Chevy Silverado. Was that the 4-cylinder version, or
no? It was not a 4-cylinder. The Silverado I had just before I went to California was the 4-wheel drive LT Crew Cab Trail Boss edition, which is basically the off-road version. It's got the Z71 suspension package and all kinds of other stuff. This one had the 5.3 liter V8 with the older 8-speed automatic transmission rather than the new 10-speed, which is available as an option, but it wasn't on the truck I was driving. So this is the newest truck, from GM, along with the new Sierra, GMC Sierra, which has a little bit different styling. The design of the Silverado has been somewhat controversial. Some people really hate it. Some people think it's just dull and bland, and others, well, I think there's a couple of people that liked it, but I haven't really heard anybody really rave about the desigin.
All right, so it doesn't sound like you like it.
I'm fine with it. It doesn't bother me. It's personally, I still think the Ram, the new, especially the new Ram, is the best looking of the full size trucks. I think it's got the best design. This one's fine. Certainly, the front end of the new Silverado is a lot busier than past editions. There's a lot of lines and things at various angles, and it could be considered cluttered depending on how you look at it. The one I was driving, which was the Trail Boss, is in this Cajun red paint with black trim. It had the black grill and everything, which kind of hid a lot of that stuff. I actually kind of like some of the lines and creases along the body sides, that kind of break it up a little bit. It doesn't look so slab sided. Others are not crazy about that. I'm fine with it. It's not exceptionally good or bad for me. But like I said, with design, everybody's got to make their own opinion about it.
Oh yeah, and everybody certainly has input. I don't know, honestly. I don't find it all that offensive, and I think GM is not the only company that's going with lots of sculpting in the body sides, just kind of random lines that they play off the light, and they give you these different shapes in the reflections and shadow areas. Everybody's doing that, so they're not alone there. And
I think that's generally a good thing. It makes it a little more interesting, a little more. It catches your eye in different ways, and makes you think about it a little more. Like I say, I don't personally have an issue with the design.
The last time GM did a really groundbreaking design was, I think, in 1988, when they went from the trucks that they've been building since like 1972,
right,
to that was, I think, the GMT 400 or the first very aerodynamic trucks.
That was the GMT 400.
Those were, that was such a huge radical shift, and they've kind of been just rehashing that and refining it ever since, which is fine because none of them look bad, and they're trucks, and people are very factional about their trucks. I was just curious.
Yeah, and this, this is certainly the biggest departure in design since that GMT 400 at least for the Chevrolet trucks. The GMC trucks have diverged a little bit more over the years. With bolder wheel arches, kind of squared off wheel arches. This one, unlike a lot of the past ones, the wheel arches are more round. The wheel wells are more rounded than in the past. Rather than the more squared off look that GM's often had on their trucks. So it's fine. It's a good design. Interestingly, the one I drove is the Trail Boss version. They have three engines at launch. So they've got or four engines actually, I think, but the old 4.3 liter V6 I think is only available on like fleet vehicles.
Right, that's like the LT kind of whatever, right?
So like the work truck, the low end work truck models. So I don't think they're selling those at retail. And then there's this new 2.7 liter turbocharged four cylinder, which is a big four. And it's the first time they've ever put a four cylinder into the full size trucks. I've heard some mixed reviews on that. Some people like it, some people don't. I haven't driven it yet, so I will refrain from commenting on that one. There's also the 6.2 liter V8, as well as a 5.3 liter V8. And then coming in the spring will be a new 3 liter inline six diesel. The two V8s, both the 5.3 and the 6.2, are the first production engines to feature something called dynamic skip fire. I think GM is actually branding it as dynamic fuel management. So it's a next generation version of cylinder deactivation, which is something that GM's had on their truck V8 engines for a long time now. Which under light load conditions in the past, the cylinder deactivation would shut off either 2 or 4 cylinders and could run as a V6 or a 4-cylinder engine. In the case of this new system, it's a system that was developed by a California startup called Tula, and they commercialized it in cooperation with Delphi. And this one, what it does is uses some sensors on the engine to detect vibration and as well as getting the other engine inputs for load and demand and everything else, and it can shut off up to all but one cylinder. So it can, in principle, a V8 engine go from a V8 down to a single cylinder. In practice, on these engines, on these GM engines, they're only going down to 2 cylinders because the explanation I got when I talked to Dan Nicholson earlier this year about it, he's their head of powertrain at GM, is that they found that dropping down all the way down to 1 cylinder didn't really give them any real advantage in terms of fuel economy, and started to get into areas where vibration could be a problem. And what it does is on the old cylinder deactivation, it was always the same cylinders that would shut off. It would be the 2 on the end and then the 4 on one end of the engine. In the case of this one, it can shut off any of the 8 cylinders, and it doesn't keep the same cylinders shut off. So it'll on one engine cycle it'll shut off one cylinder. It'll shut off a cylinder at one position, then the next one it'll go another, and so it bounces around. So it's kind of randomized. And we actually did last year at CES. I did an interview with somebody from Delphi, a VP of engineering at Delphi, Jim. I can't remember his name now, but we had it on the show. We included that interview in the show, and I'll find the link to it and include it in the show notes. And he explained some more of this, but basically, the way the system works is really just completely seamless. As you're driving along, you never see any indication, or there's never any indication in terms of noise or vibration or anything else that it's running on anything but 8 cylinders. So from that perspective, it works really well. From the perspective of fuel economy, it should give about a 10-12% boost in fuel economy on these engines. But in reality, on this particular truck that I was driving, because I think in part because it was the Trail Boss edition. So it had the off-road suspension and the big off-road tires, and speaking of which, the tires on this thing make a lot of noise when you're rolling down the road. There's this big open tread blocks. They are not quiet tires at all. So if you're looking for a quiet ride, you probably want to stay away from the Trail Boss version.
Well, and that's funny too, because the GM trucks for at least the last several years have touted how quiet and refined they are. They made a big deal about how much they went through those trucks. The last, what was it, 2013, 2012, something like that.
I think it was 13.
And they changed a lot of the steel, and they did a lot of work to just get rid of noise, vibration, harshness, bring the interior noise level down, and it worked. They were pretty quiet, and that was actually quite nice. It was one of the things that I liked the most about them. So to go backwards on that and add knobbier tires, I guess it's a particular model, right? Like,
that's why I say it's something that's particular to the Trail Boss. If you drive one of the regular ones, on standard, on-road tires, it's going to be a lot quieter, because when you're in the truck, the truck itself feels rock solid. There's no vibrations, there's no rattles or anything like that. It's just the tread noise of these off-road tires. And, the same thing applies if you drive a Raptor or, a Ram Rebel, that has, off-road optimized tires, or a Wrangler. Those kind of tires are inherently going to make a lot more noise when you're driving down the road. So, if what you want to do, if your usage pattern for your truck is to drive on road, and you're never going to go off, bouncing down trails or, through canyons, don't be a poser. Don't buy a Trail Boss or, want any of the equivalent off-road variants of the trucks. Only buy those if you actually plan to use them off-road. Otherwise, buy one of the other models, because, like I said, these, regardless of who what company you're talking about, these tires do make a lot of noise, especially at highway speeds. There's quite a hum that gets generated by these tires. The other thing about these, the tires, is not just the noise, but you also have a lot more rolling resistance because the truck is sitting up a little higher. You've got more aerodynamic drag, and GM did a lot of work on the aerodynamics on this truck, to improve it, to help fuel economy, and it also had some other benefits as well. Like, one of the cool things about the new GM trucks is they have a higher bedside, so you can there's actually more volume, up. You can fill up more stuff in the bed of the truck all the way up to the top edge of the bed, and I forget what the total increase is, but it was a pretty significant increase. The bedsides are about 5 or 6 inches taller than they were in the past. Which makes a noticeable difference if you tend to carry a lot of stuff in the bed as opposed to using the truck for towing. That helps aero. You've got things like standard grill shutters that close off the airflow through the engine. But again, when you go to the Trail Boss, it sits up higher, which means it's going to have a larger frontal area. Those tires are going to have both more rolling resistance and more aerodynamic drag. So that has an impact on fuel economy. So the four-wheel drive Silverado with the 5.3 liter is EPA rated at 16 miles per gallon city, 22 highway, 18 combined. Over the just under a week that I drove it, I got about 17, which is by
it's not terrible.
It's not terrible. So, if you compare it to a truck of 5 or 10 years ago, that's actually really good, especially since a lot of my driving was around town. But if you compare it to some of the latest generation of trucks, again, if you compare it to the ones that are optimized for on-road use, you look at the Ram with the e-Torque, the mild hybrid system, or one of the EcoBoost Fords. They're going to get better fuel economy than this. But again, this is low. What I got is lower because of all this other stuff. Because it's an off-road version, and they don't separately rate. They have a separate fuel economy rating for the Trail Boss that I can see. So it's it all comes down to what you need. I mean, if you want a little better fuel economy in your truck, again, probably, unless you're going to go actually do some off-roading and use the truck the way it's intended, you probably don't need to spend the extra money on the Trail Boss. Go for one of the more premium editions.
But it doesn't look as tough. I mean, it's the same as the people who buy the Raptor and then commute in them. Like they're just willing to pay for the fuel to fill the thing.
Yeah, I mean, and if you don't care about the noise and the fuel economy, go for it. It's your money.
But it's our planet, Sam. It's our planet.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, that's a whole other argument that I'm not going to get into with the people that commute in Raptors, unless they're acquaintances of mine. I'm not going to go accost random people about it, but it's just an inherently inefficient way to get from place to place.
Yeah. Then the other thing about this truck is the interior, which if you read Lawrence Ulrich's review in the Drive a month or so ago, he was not crazy about this truck. And to be honest, the interior trim, the materials and everything, it certainly doesn't feel as premium as the new Ram. The new Ram, is by far and away the nicest truck interior of anything on the road today, the new Ram 1500.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody's chasing the Ram. The thing that astounds me about that, or the thing that I like about it, is even if it's not the Limited, in the lower trim levels with cloth seats and stuff, that it's still a very nice interior, and nobody's doing that as well as Ram.
Yeah, and they frankly they've been doing it for a while, so they're doing it well. Even Ford is certainly not up to the same standard as the Rams. And I'd say that overall the Silverado is roughly on a par in terms of materials and everything with the F-150. It does actually have a couple of things that I would say are advantages over certainly over the F-150. It's like the Ram, it now has USB Type-C ports in there. It has two of them up front in addition to the traditional USB-A ports. So if you've got a newer phone that uses USB-C, or one of the new iPad Pros or something like that, that means you get higher power output. It'll charge faster from those ports. You can plug it in directly. And then one of the really cool features in the back seat and the crew cab, there's actually a couple of hidden storage compartments in the seat backs. So if you look at the rear seat back, you'll see there's a little strap that you can pull out, and it opens up. And so there's a section in the middle of the rear seat back that opens up, and there's a door, and there's a hidden compartment behind that. So you can stash some stuff, that you want to keep out of sight back there, as well as in the big center console area.
That's the thing that separates, I think, trucks from or the trucks that are sort of well thought out from those that aren't. The way they have the size of the center consoles that you can fit like hanging folders in some of them, and just all of that stuff is very thoughtful and clever. Those are the things that I like to see in trucks, is just that they thought about the people who are going to use them. What's our favorite subject? What's the infotainment like in it?
It's pretty much the same kind of stuff you'll find in most current Chevrolet vehicles. It's the latest version of Chevy MyLink, which is based on the same electronic architecture as Cadillac CUE, but with a different skin. It's a pretty straightforward system. You get a grid of 8 icons. You can swipe through a couple of pages of it. It's got support for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay as it did in the previous generation as well. It's a touchscreen like all other trucks. There's no center controller or anything like that. It's about what you expect in most modern domestic vehicles.
Don't sound so excited. You're like, it's there.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine. It works. It didn't do anything silly. It was fairly responsive. Unlike some of the earlier systems, like 7-8 years ago, where there was a lot of lag. It was responsive enough. I will try out the stock interfaces, and it's pretty much the same interface that you'll find on pretty much any other contemporary Chevrolet vehicle right now. So there's no surprises there. It's nothing fancy, but it works reasonably well.
Yeah. Well, all right.
And this truck cost $57,000.
That was the sort of next thing I was going to ask. So what kind of size of how big is the pile of cash they want you to light on fire for it?
It's a pretty hefty pile. Not as big as the pile of leaves that I raked up in my yard over the last few weeks, but definitely a pretty hefty pile of cash.
But you don't need a truck for a pile of leaves. That's what I always come back to with the pickup trucks is they're not always as useful as you'd think they are, and I think that's why we're seeing a proliferation of 2/3 SUVs, right? Like the crew cab pickups are very popular for the individual car owner or the individual buyer, personal.
Yeah, and it's the thing. The crew cab over the last 10 years 15 years really, has become the dominant form factor for trucks. And it used to be, in the late 80s, early 90s, it was all about the regular cabs, and then the extended cabs, had some, they took some market share, but in the light duty trucks, the crew cab didn't really become a factor in light duty trucks until the late 90s, is when they really started to become available.
And that's when people started using them as personal vehicles, like a sedan replacement.
Right. Exactly. And you mentioned the GMT 400 earlier, which was like the 87, 88 variant.
Yeah, 88. Yeah.
I don't think it was there at launch, but and within the first couple of years of the GMT 400, it was the first. I'm pretty sure it was one of the first trucks to have the rear hinged half doors to give access to the back seat and the extended cab. Prior to that, you had to flip the seats forward to get into the cab. It was like a coupe, and the GMT 400 was one of the first to offer those half doors to give you better access. Actually, I think they did it on the S10 and S15 first, and then put it on the big trucks. And then subsequently, in the years since, the crew cab has become so popular that even the extended cab now is almost as big as, almost as long as what, some of the early crew cabs were. And, they're now all using forward hinged, traditionally hinged doors, for all four doors. But
I find it weird that Ram makes two different 4-door cabs. You've got the extended cab that has those short rear doors, but they're not really all that short. And then you've got the full, crew cab that has larger rear doors, the larger back seat area. It's like, why bother? Because who wants to buy the shortest extended cab? Just make them all the same size. But they've done the math.
The thing about the crew cabs though is because the cab is so long, you generally can't get like the longest bed. So if you want an 8-foot bed, you can't get that with a crew cab. Whereas the extended cab, you can usually still get, an 8-foot bed with the extended cab. So you have that extra convenience of the longer cab, the back seat. But if you need the long bed, you still have that available to you. So that's why you have that differentiation. But, the regular cabs, are largely now, they don't sell very many of them retail anymore. It's mostly for the contractor market, and usually, for applications where they're putting, putting something on the back, to carry all the tools or equipment or parts or whatever they're hauling around. So those are the most common uses for the regular cabs. For retail customers, the crew cabs, I think, are typically somewhere about 60 to 65% of all sales.
Man. That's So I guess it just speaks to how people actually use the trucks, where the beds are small and the payload is low and the towing capacity isn't great. I mean, the towing capacity is more than you're going to need anyway, but overall,
you can get 11, 12,000 pound towing capacity depending on which engine you choose and which combination you choose. So,
Right.
you can't complain about this, but 12,000
That's what I'm
pounds is
saying,
a
like-
lot more than your average truck buyer is ever going to actually use.
Yeah, the towing, in terms of towing, they're fine. So yeah, let me wind that back a little bit. But the payload, you have to do the careful math, and like, if I put 4 full-size adults in here, how much can I put in the bed? And sometimes it's not that high. It's not as big a number as you'd expect. So
Yeah, I mean the typical payload on the full size trucks now is around 1,700 to 2,000 pounds. So you put four adults in there, you're getting typically down under 1,000 pounds. But again, most of the time, if you're hauling a full load in there, you're usually not hauling a full load of people.
Yeah, no, they know their market. That's why there's so many variations and options and stuff. They wouldn't offer all those if they didn't think they could sell them or there wasn't demand. And, so trucks are really the only sort of corner of the automotive market here in the U.S. where there's still that I don't know, is it even billions or is it millions of possible combinations?
No, it's in the millions.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it is today, but I remember about 5 or 6 years ago, like for F-150. At one point there was about 14 million buildable combinations. If you went through all the different variations of engines and transmissions and front wheel or rear wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, different suspensions, different trailering packages, colors, you name, all the different trim levels. And I doubt that it's definitely still in the millions. It's probably at least 5 or 6 million buildable combinations even today, even when they've tried to simplify stuff. But when you look at for example on the the Silverado, once the diesel arrives, you're going to have 5 different engine options with 8-speed and 10-speed transmissions on various engines. It gets out of hand really fast, and then you combine the 3 different beds, regular cab, or three cabs, regular cab, extended cab, crew cab, short beds, long beds, you name it. It gets crazy.
Yeah. I mean, a company could go bankrupt making everything that way. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
So this week, my vehicle has been the Ford EcoSport SES. Yeah.
Well, there's an enthusiastic start to the review.
Well, I'm trying not to get to, I guess, just like lose perspective about where it fits. It is the most compact crossover in the Ford North American lineup, so it fills a niche. It basically is now the only way to get Fiesta hardware here, and that's fine. And it drives like a Fiesta, so it drives fine-ish, but it's really, there's a solid lack of refinement.
I would say you're being a little generous to say it drives like a Fiesta.
It feels solid. It goes down the road well. It steers well. It rides and handles decently. And honestly, I guess what I'm trying to do is, this is not a car that was designed for this market. This is a Brazilian market crossover.
No, Indian.
It was Indian.
Yes.
I thought that. Okay. So
and it's actually made in India. It's the only vehicle that Ford imports from India.
Huh. I mean, and so in a developing market, in a different place in the world, it's a different kind of car and it's a different proposition. Here, this one is an SES trim, was $26,000, and I was just like, for that kind of money, it doesn't feel refined enough. Even in this class, the engine there's a lot of vibration.
Do you have the 4-cylinder or the 1-liter 3-cylinder?
Yeah, no, it's the 4-cylinder. Performance is fine. Economy's not great because you kind of cane it in a few instances. I don't like the automatic. I think it's the power shift automatic, which I don't like. Even if it's not the power shift, I just don't like how they've calibrated it. It doesn't respond when you want it to. Like when you're pulling out into heavy traffic, it thinks about it. You're like, could you just go? And that's not just Ford There's a lot of cars that do that, but it seemed pretty stark in the EcoSport. The cabin and the outfitting seems fine-ish. The materials aren't as nice as I'd like, again, for $20-something thousand, $25,000, but it starts less than that. And this one had a couple of packages on it. It's comfortable. There are thoughtful touches. It's a small car, doesn't occupy a large footprint, but it has a lot of well thought out places to store things. There's plenty of room in the doors, like door pockets. There's actually little clever pockets on the side, on the inside sides of the seats. There's a little pocket that you could like stick your cell phone or something in there and just forget about it. So I thought that was clever. There was one standout, like the most standout thing to me is that it has a side hinge rear door. I was like, well, that is just not practical. But
why do you say it's not practical?
It's different. I just think, a hatch that swings up, you don't have to stand like back as far, and it swings up and out of the way instead of making sure you're on the proper side of it. So depending on what side of the street you're on, the way that thing opens, and I don't know. Maybe it's
the reason why it's side hinged is the original design. When they launched it in India in 2013 or 14 or so, it originally had a rear mounted spare tire. So
that makes a lot more sense.
The spare tire was mounted on the tailgate. After they started, when they first started sending them to Europe, the Europeans did not like that. They wanted the spare underneath. And so they moved the spare, but they couldn't really re-engineer the tailgate. I think that for a smaller vehicle like that, there actually are some advantages to having the side hinged gate, because for one thing, if you're obviously this isn't an issue for people of your stature, but the roof line is shorter than on some other vehicles, and compared to a lot of utilities, you compare it to an Escape or something like that, it's not as tall, and so it actually makes it a little easier to get access without bonking your head or anything. So depending on the use case, there are some advantages to having the side hinge door.
All right. I mean, I'm willing to just say, and honestly, I don't really care one way or another.
I'm not going to disagree with all the other stuff you're saying about it, but that just kind of making the excuse for that one at least. So
yeah, I got in it the first day and I was like, this is what people want, and then realizing also that not exactly. This is what Ford had to try to meet what people want here. It's not necessarily what people, you know what I'm saying? It's what they had in their lineup that they were able to fit into the lineup here. And I would expect the next time around, if they decide to redesign it, they're going to do it more with the North American market in mind, and it will be better. Its styling is funky. I don't really like the way it looks. It's really stubby, and its tires look very small, and the wheel openings and stuff. But those are stylistic. That's opinion. So fine. I can see how if you're that sort of urban driver and you want a crossover, yes, this is largely what people want. It's got some cargo space. It fits in pretty much just about any parking spot. It's not that long, so it's easy to get in and out of through traffic. You can thread the needle with it pretty easily, and because it's sure-footed, that helps out quite a bit. The lack of power is an issue when you're trying to thread the needle, but it does okay. It's fine, and it'll get up there and move itself along. You just when I compare it to something like the Honda HR-V. The Honda feels a lot more refined, or I'm constantly thinking a size level up, because this is just compact. If I wanted something this small, I'd have a hatchback, not a crossover. But
that applies to you and I, but unfortunately, it's not. It doesn't apply to the market at large.
Right, and so if people want something smaller, it's not a terrible option. It just doesn't feel as nice as some of the other competitors, in terms of functionally, yeah, it's fine. I have a hard time paying $27,000 $6,000 for this vehicle getting 24 miles per gallon. And I also think that for me, the one determining factor for an in-town crossover is going to be the turning circle. And this has an awful turning circle.
Yeah.
It's just,
so
you got to do 3-point turns everywhere.
Have you driven the Nissan Kicks?
I haven't.
Okay, but you've driven the CHR though, right? The Toyota CHR?
Yes.
How would you compare this against the CHR?
So the CHR is better to drive, but the EcoSport is probably more practical. It's a little more upright. Space-wise, I don't know how far off they are. In my mind, the EcoSport feels a little bit more roomy. I don't know how true that is. But
I think it does have a slight edge, mainly because of just kind of the profile of the car. It's got that boxier profile, more traditional wagon-like roofline, whereas the CHR, is more like a coupe.
I think because the EcoSport is sort of making fewer allowances for style, it has an edge in practicality. And honestly, I think the interior materials and outfitting and in the Ford is probably better than the Toyota, but the Toyota was more fun to drive.
Yeah, well, you're right though that the EcoSport is definitely it was never originally intended for the U.S. market. They've pretty heavily re-engineered it twice now. First when it went to Europe, and then again before they brought it to North America. They've gone through it and done a pretty hefty revamp on a lot of elements of it. So, like for example, they re-engineered, they redid the suspension. The architecture didn't change, but they retuned everything when they went to the European market. They moved the spare tire off the tailgate, put it underneath, things like that. And then when they brought it to North America, they gave it an all new interior. So you've got that touchscreen that's sitting up on top of the dashboard, as the current style. All that was completely redone before they launched it here. But, you're right. It still has a bit of, kind of the cheap feel to it. It was clearly, it was not designed for a market with higher expectations. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but I don't know how much that hurts them, because I feel like we try to be in tune with those expectations, which are sort of like a market-wide thing. But when somebody's on a personal level looking for something, and this is at the lower end of the market, you're looking to not spend a whole lot of money, and you're looking for something because this is the perfect first vehicle for somebody who just got their first job, and you're going to live in an urban center, and from a hatchback.
It's a great urban crossover, because of that small footprint. It's easy to park and things like that. But I think when they get around to the next generation, that's where you'll really start to see them do something quite different with it, to really make it more appealing. Although, it's selling reasonably well here as well. It's last year they were doing like 5,000 units a month, which is pretty good.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I hesitated a little bit. I have my critique of it, but I think that some of those criticisms are just things that Ford is aware of, first of all.
Oh yeah, they're well aware of the limitations of the EcoSport. They obviously they play it up as much as they can, but they know that this is their first entry into this segment, and it probably it won't be the last.
Yeah, but honestly, backing up a little bit, it's more positive than negative. It fills that hole in the market that Ford needed to fill, and so it does its job. And you're going to make a trade off no matter what brand you go to. Like we were just talking about the CHR. Well, the CHR, it has its own list of positives and negatives, and they're different than the EcoSport. So I wish they'd give it another damn name too. EcoSport is just hard to constantly remember because it's eco, but it's Ford, so they say Eco.
Well, again, unlike EcoBoost, when they launched this thing, they very, very explicitly took care to pronounce it Eco, because they didn't really want to play up the whole fuel economy thing too much, because frankly, as you saw, it doesn't get particularly great fuel economy. Right. So they were trying to play that down a little bit.
I don't. It was very interesting to drive, and it's not a vehicle I dislike. It's just, there's a lot of competition down there in that end of the market, and so it's tough to just drive one and say, this is the perfect thing. Like they're all going to have trade-offs, and some are going to be better than others. My preference would be for something that is a little quieter, a little smoother, still as light on its feet, that can maneuver a little bit more tightly in town. But it's an option. It's there. If you like Fords, go check it out.
Yeah, and unlike the CHR, the EcoSport is available with all-wheel drive. The CHR, at least in North America, is front drive only.
That's true. That's actually one of its selling points. The one that I'm driving is an SES four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. I forget what they call it, but it's basically all-wheel drive. And not everything in this, like the Kicks doesn't have it. There's a couple that others that don't have it either. That don't have all-wheel drive. They're just front-wheel drive only. So that is something that gives it an edge. Where if you want that all-wheel drive thing, you can get it.
Yeah, I mean, if you live in the Northeast or somewhere where it gets cold and snowy, it's definitely something worth considering.
That reminds me. Last week we talked about winter tires, and so I was looking to find something to put on the Crown Victoria, and there's a whole new class of tires that I hadn't been aware of, or maybe they're overselling it, but. So the Toyo Celsius is one of them, and it's not a all-season tire. They call it an all-weather tire. So it's actually designed to deliver better snow and ice traction, but also be on the car year-round. But it's not the same as like just your regular all-wheel drive tire. So the all-weather tire has the little mountain with the snowflake icon on its sidewall. So I was very curious about that. I'm going to have to see. Look more into it, but basically it's got a deeper tread, it's got different siping, and probably a different compound than your regular all season tire that, like we were talking about, gets the compound gets harder in cold weather and stuff. But in some tests, the all weather tires and the Toyo Celsius in particular, they do deliver shorter stops. They're not quite as good as something like the Blizzaks that I've got on the Jeep, but they're also better than the all-season tires that it would have come with otherwise. So it's just an interesting wrinkle that,
Well, I did see Alex Nunez in LA this week at the auto show, and he also still reps Michelin as well. So he's gonna reach out to you to try and hook you up with something to test out from Michelin.
Well, now he's on the hook for it.
Yeah.
I don't know if he listens. He probably doesn't because he's a busy guy.
He does sometimes, and he did say he would get on the show with us soon.
That's good. I would like to have him on the show. I like it when he busts my chops.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the Michelin website, and they've got the new Michelin Cross Climate Plus tire, high level of performance and safety for a long time in all weather conditions. So I think this kind of fits into that segment that you're talking about of all weather tires.
Yeah, so that was a new one on me to see, like, what's an all-weather tire? And I guess that's basically what it is. It's an all-season that's designed to actually perform a little bit better in the snow.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely have to try these out on one of these days. Okay, so what else? Are you done with the EcoSport?
Yeah, I'm done with the EcoSport. Let's move on. Let's hit some topics, because you were in LA at the LA Auto Show, and that's way more exciting.
Yeah. So in LA, I saw there was actually a surprising amount of new product this time around. A lot of debuts there this year, and it all started off on Monday with Lincoln. Gave us before the show officially opened. They gave us a preview of the new Lincoln Aviator, which we saw as a concept in New York last March at the New York show, and it's now in production form and pretty much unchanged from the concept that they showed last spring. So, the interesting thing about the Aviator, in addition to bringing back an old nameplate that it was actually a fairly short-lived nameplate for Lincoln, but it was back in I think 2003 to 2005, so it was only about 3 years that it was in production, based on the last generation body-on-frame Explorer. This one is all new, and when I say all new, I mean really all new. It's not just a rehash of anything existing. This is the first product off of one of the 5 new platforms that Ford talked about when they gave us a preview last spring. So going forward, all of Ford's models are going to be moving to one of 5 flexible platform architectures, as they described them. There's a transverse engine unibody, which will be for smaller and mid-sized vehicles. Kind of replaces the current CD and compact platforms that we've got today. There is a body on frame, which is for the trucks and the big utilities. There's a commercial vehicle platform, which is for things like the Transit and Transit Connect. There will be a new dedicated electric platform, which will debut with the 2020 electric crossover that they're building. And then the 5th one is this longitudinal engine rear drive unibody platform that is the basis for the Aviator and will also underpin the new Explorer when it arrives next spring as well.
It is known as a proper platform. The engine is in there north-south.
Yep.
And it drives the rear wheels.
Yes. or all the wheels. It also has all-wheel drive. Both of the unibody platforms will have support for all-wheel drive. But in this case, the engine is, as you said, longitudinal. There's a drive shaft running down the middle to the rear axle. It's got multi-link rear, or actually the integral link rear. So it's a similar layout to what you have today on the Mustang and the Fusion and the Edge. Different parts, the parts are not interchangeable. The size is a little bit different, but the same type of layout, which is a really good setup, a really nice multi-link setup that does really good wheel positioning. And then at the front, because you no longer have the engine mounted sideways, you have a little more room to work with up front. So it's got a double control arm, short long arm front suspension layout, which should aid ride quality and agility and steering feel and everything else. Overall, the size is fairly similar to the current generation Explorer. They didn't give us actual dimensions, so we can't say for sure. But what's interesting is they've taken the design language that we have on the Navigator today, that debuted on the a couple years ago on the Continental, and then went to the Navigator. On this one, this is not just a 3/4 scale Navigator. They've taken that approach that you see on the Navigator and refined it a little bit more. The Navigator, is big and blocky, kind of aircraft carrier sized vehicle.
Yeah, sure is.
This one, the edges are a little more smoothed off, a little more rounded. When you look at the Navigator in profile, you'll see that the roof and the belt line and the character lines along the side all run fairly horizontal, fairly parallel to each other. When you look at the Aviator in profile, it's got a little bit more taper, a subtle taper towards the back. It looks a little sleeker, a little more refined. It's still a fairly large vehicle, but a little, in some ways it looks a little more upscale. It's a 3-row crossover. The base engine in here is going to be the 3-liter twin turbo V6. Please don't call it an EcoBoost that you find in the
it's
in the
GTDI,
Continental.
right?
It is GTDI, yes, but
GTDI,
Lincoln no longer uses the EcoBoost branding.
Yeah.
So
they should use some other classically great name.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what that would be.
I know they haven't come up with one yet. I'm sure at some point the marketers will come up with one. But it's basically a 3-liter version of the Nano V6 that's in the F-150 and in several other vehicles. And in this application, it's doing 400 horsepower, 450 foot-pounds of torque. But then, the thing that's new, back last March when Ford gave us a preview of a bunch of new products, one of the things that they talked about at that time was that going forward, all of their utility vehicles would have electrified powertrain options, which means, a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or full battery electric as at least available on every single new SUV that they build. And that starts with the Aviator. So, in order to do that, as they've designed these new platforms, they've done something that's called, in the industry, it's called package protecting. So when you design the platform, you design it with the anticipation that, you know that there's going to be some versions of it that are going to have hybrid systems in them. And so you build in the space in the architecture for that. So, if you look at, the C-Max hybrid, as an example, or actually better, the plug-in hybrid or the Focus Electric, you'll notice that if you look in the cargo area, there's not much of it left because a lot of it was consumed by batteries that were, added later, well after the vehicle was already designed. In the case of this Aviator, that is not the case. The battery sits entirely underneath the right-hand side of the floor, underneath the second row passenger side, right-hand side seats, and spans from about the back of the front passenger seat all the way to the just ahead of the rear axle. They're not saying at this point what the size of what the capacity of the battery is, but they hinted that because this vehicle is also intended to be sold in China, where there's some significant tax breaks for plug-in hybrids that get over 50 kilometers of electric range, so about 31 miles of electric range, that it will be enough to support that. So it's probably going to be somewhere around 18 to 16, somewhere between 16 and 20 kilowatt hours, probably somewhere in the 18 kilowatt hour range. But the battery, despite that size, doesn't take up any room inside the vehicle. So you have the full cargo space. There's still a spare tire in the back underneath the cargo floor. You've got plenty of room inside this thing. The third row is obviously not going to be as spacious as a Navigator, but it's definitely better than the current generation Explorer. So it's definitely usable. You've got a lot of the same similar kinds of design themes inside that you have on the Navigator. There's a Revel audio system with 28 speakers and all kinds of DSPs and things to
I didn't
make it sound
like
better.
The sound of that one. In the Navigator it sounded kind of bad, but I'm picky, so there's that.
Yeah.
I like the engine turned to metal trim, and it looks really, really, really classy in pictures.
Yeah, so and it looks great in person too. For a big 3-row crossover, this is probably one of the best looking I've seen in that segment. So and what I didn't mention was the plug-in hybrid version. Instead of pairing it with a smaller, say, 4-cylinder engine, they're adding that right onto the same twin turbo 3-liter V6. So this will what they're calling the Aviator Grand Touring, which is the plug-in hybrid.
I see.
Will be the most powerful production Lincoln ever, 450 horsepower and 600 foot-pounds of torque.
So they're kind of doing what Volvo does, where the hybrid is the T8. It's the top of the range.
Yes.
For a luxury SUV, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the interesting thing about this, this is their new what they're calling their modular hybrid architecture. So it's the first of their rear drive hybrid systems. So we're going to see basically the same system showing up in the F-150, the Explorer, the Mustang. So if they're getting 450 horsepower and 600 foot-pounds of torque in this thing, I think that's a good sign for the upcoming hybrid Mustang.
And that stuff, like these platforms and new tech for Ford are hotly anticipated. Even if the customers don't know it yet, Ford's current lineup is getting a little long in the tooth in some ways. So they're sitting on these they're not really sitting on them, but they've got these 5 different platforms that are all going to start to launch. And I think we're going to see a lot of new stuff from Ford that makes the public aware that there has been stuff going on.
Yeah, stuff like
years.
this doesn't happen overnight. The work on this, has been going on for almost 4 years now. They started down this path quite a long time ago, and the Aviator and the Explorer go into production in the spring. They'll be on sale by early summer, and it looks very promising.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a nice piece of design inside and out, and that's nice to see from Lincoln. The Navigator, like you said, is another nice piece of design, but I expect that the Aviator, if it catches on, might actually outsell the Navigator, but maybe not.
I suspect it almost certainly will. This may very well turn out to be their best-selling vehicle.
Okay, good. It better be good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what else did you see there? I see there's a new Porsche 911 that looks like the old Porsche 911, kinda, but that's normal.
Well, the 911 is one of those icons that you can only change so much without turning off the fan base. It's ultimately it still has to look like a 911, and in the case of the 911 in particular, compared to a lot of other cars that have been around for a long time, they have a particularly dedicated fan base. And this is a car that very nearly died in the early 1980s. It almost went out of production. It was supposed to be replaced by the 928, and that never quite happened. It got saved. They revised it. They kept redesigning it, and this is now the 9th generation of the 911, and it looks sharp. Obviously, as soon as you see it, you realize it's a 911. But when you start looking closer, you start to see some of the changes. Like, for example, this is the first time that they have staggered the wheel sizes, or the wheel diameters front to rear, so that the rear wheels are a little bit larger in diameter than the fronts. They've long had wider wheels at the back, but they've always been the same diameter. But now this one has larger diameter, so it gives it it's very subtle, but when you look at it, you can see it's got a little more aggressive stance to it than it did before. And they've made other changes, especially in the lighting at the back. Now you look at the rear, and it now has this slot kind of that goes all the way across, with a slim LED tail lamp that goes all the way across. It looks quite sharp. The interior is all new, much more modern, but still, classically 911. It still has, the 5 round gauges directly in front of the driver, the tack in the center, but the 2 on either side of it are actually digital displays, 7-inch diameter digital displays. So you can reconfigure those to put whatever information you want on those. So you can they can display simulated analog gauges or put other information there.
Yeah, well, and Porsche, I think one of the things I like every time I drive a Porsche with nav is that it puts that map right in the middle of the tack or the speedometer display, so you can actually see the map there instead of looking over at the screen. It looks like they've made the dashboard and the whole instrument panel all the way across evocative of that earlier 911, the original sort of air-cooled 911 generation, where it had a more simple instrument panel than is sort of currently the fashion, because this looks simplified, cleaned up. Porsche interiors over the last, 10 or 15 years have gotten very
cluttered,
heavy. The original Panamera was the thing. You look at that and you're like, holy crap, it's full of all these bristles of like controls. And it's just, this looks, the center console down by the shifter and the expanse of the dashboard and stuff, it's very cleaned up. So that bodes well. The thing that I am less than thrilled about is that the one that I saw on Autoblog, the pictures of the gallery, it's a PDK, and I hope that they're not going all PDK. I'd rather see a stick.
They're launching with all PDKs, but there will be some manual transmission 911s coming along eventually.
There better be, because that's a freaking 911.
No, I don't disagree. But ultimately the performance of the PDK dual clutch gearbox is better, and that's what they're going for.
It's hard
that's
to
the one that
argue
most
with
customers want now.
Yeah, I mean, the ability of the PDK to not break the torque to the rear wheels as you're accelerating. It's just the seamless flow of torque even as it shifts gears. That's impressive. It's just boring.
Yeah. But, the other thing, it's all, at least at launch, it's all twin turbo flat sixes. The S has 443 horsepower in the Carrera S. So more, if you think back, to, the 1970s when the original Porsche 930, the original 911 turbo came out, it was 300 horsepower. And in those days, that was just completely bonkers.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Even the 959, didn't have this kind of power, but now you've got 443 horsepower, as standard in the Carrera S, and there's only going to be more powerful versions coming, as you get the GT3 and the GT2 and the various other higher performance versions. Actually, they showed, the other thing they had at the show was the 911 GT2 RS Club Sport, which is actually a track only version of the current 911 GT2. It's naturally aspirated, has a big giant wing on there, and it's a track car only, so it's not legal. It has no VIN, so you can't drive it on the street. But it'll, that's going to be a very limited production model at a very high price. Yes. Although, this 911 will not exactly be what we would call affordable. The coupe, or the two-door 911 Carrera S starts at $113,200, and the 4S starts at $120,600. So they're getting up there in price.
Yeah, because I think that's smart. I would assume that Porsche looked at what the average price is for new 911s, and they realized that nobody buys the base model. It was just because they have such a wide array of things you can add on, and they're more than happy to charge you for those. So they'll set the price at, gives them a little bit more room between that and the Cayman and Boxster as well, because those cars have evolved to really fill that need of, like, I guess, starter Porsche.
Yeah. Such as it is.
Yeah, and so those are sort of, there's that, like, my first Porsche was a Boxster, and then I went to a 911, a used 911, and now I bought the new 911. So there's that progression, and so I see moving the 911 up a little bit makes some sense. Although I also expect there may be a rear drive only version with a less powerful engine, that, because these are all S's and 4S's,
right?
So there may be just a regular one. And they're all Carreras too, right? So you get a 911, it might actually be one that's under $100,000. So.
Not much under 100 though.
Yeah,
and in fact, if you're talking about Porsche, very often they will charge you more to get less. The
Boxster Spider, for example.
Yes.
We took all the air conditioning and the radio out. If you want them, you can have them. You just pay more.
Yeah.
Porsche people do that because.
That's right.
I don't know.
It's called capitalism.
That's fine. I will never ever be able to afford a new Porsche, is my guess. But what I might be able to afford is, let's see, the other stuff you saw was the 2020 Mazda 3, which seems to have made some waves with the sedan and hatchback. Definitely won't be able to afford the Audi e-Tron GT. But also the 2020 Kia Soul these are sort of your highlights. So.
Yeah. So the Mazda, the Mazda 3, has long been one of my favorite compact cars. And the new one, is the first production model to embody this new version of this updated version of Mazda's Kodo design language. So it's a much smoother, but there's no you don't have the creases in the side, but there's still some distinct sculpting to it. It has some shape to it, and when the light catches it, you can see these the curves in the bodywork, and it really looks sharp. It's a very impressive design, and the interior is far and away the best interior you will find on any mainstream compact car. I mean, nothing really comes close to what Mazda is doing in their interiors. It has an absolutely more premium feel to anything in the segment. The downside of the design, potentially, especially on the hatchback, is visibility maybe somewhat more restricted, or will be somewhat more restricted. Because of the way the belt line sweeps up in the back, it has a fairly thick pillar in the back. The glass is kind of kept to a minimum. When you sit in the back seat, the roof line actually curves over and down on the sides. So you have a high belt line, and then the top edge of the glass is actually relatively low. So it can be a little claustrophobic feeling back there. We'll see, once we get a chance to have it out on the road, what it actually feels like in terms of real world visibility. But it's launching with the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder that's in the current Mazda 3 as the upgrade engine, and then at the end of 2019, so the launch version goes on sale about February or so of next year, and then towards the end of next year, they will have the global launch of the Skyactiv X engine that we talked about earlier this year. It's the first spark-controlled compression ignition engine, which is should give a significant boost in fuel economy to this thing, and it'll launch initially in Europe, and then come over here to the U.S. They haven't said exactly when it'll launch in the U.S. market, but that it will be coming in the Mazda 3 and probably in other Mazda models as well.
And then, are they going to bring the Skyactiv D, the diesel, or not?
We don't know.
Okay.
They actually finally got all the paperwork done for the CX-5, and it should be launching in the CX-5 imminently. Like in the last couple of weeks, they finally got everything signed off by EPA, and so that should be going on sale shortly. During a briefing we had on Thursday morning, they did say that there would be other diesel announcements coming, but they gave no indication as to what models. My guess is we're more likely to see something in the CX-9 than any other models, but who knows? Frankly, though, having driven the prototype Skyactiv X, I don't think you need the diesel in the 3. I think the Skyactiv X will be just dandy. I'm really looking forward to driving the production version of that.
All right. I mean, my assumption too is that in the European market, the hatch is going to do well, and here in the U.S., neither the hatch nor the sedan will do that well, but the sedan will probably do better.
The Mazda 3 hatch, has traditionally done pretty well over here. Compact hatches in recent years have done fairly well, as part of the, in terms of take rate in the segment. So I don't, I mean, it's not going to be like 10% penetration. It'll probably be somewhere closer to like 30 to 40% of sales.
I mean, it's a slick looking car. I kind of wonder how Mazda does it, given that they're independent. They don't have a whole lot of institutional largesse behind them. This is something that we talked. I was fortunate enough to sit in several briefings with some of the folks from Mazda, including their head of product development, their head of powertrain, and their head of design over a couple of days in LA. And they talked about kind of their process, which is there's a lot. They really focus on trying to get the fundamentals right. And keeping things relatively straightforward, not making it too complex, and being able to
share a lot of things across their vehicles. They know, they're well aware of the fact that they have limited resources compared to a lot of larger companies, and so they really focus on trying to get the fundamentals right and be able to then share those elements across multiple vehicle lines, and make the most out of everything that they do.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems to be working for them. It's impressive that they can do stuff that bigger automakers can't.
Yeah,
or they're
and, now
to do
now they also have a tie-up with Toyota,
right.
which will help them, especially on the electrification side. And come 2020, Toyota or Mazda will be launching their first battery electric vehicle, and they're also going to have a range extended electric vehicle, which will use a Wankel rotary as the range extender.
Yeah, which, I mean, anytime you can use the Wankel, I love it.
Absolutely.
Might not be the best way to do it, but I love it because
I think in that application, as the range extender, I think it'll actually work really well because it's so compact, and so power dense, and when you're using it, largely, in a steady state condition rather than revving it up and down all the time. I think, with that and direct injection, I think it can be reasonably efficient as well.
Yeah, we'll just see how much oil it burns, but
we'll see.
So, did you want to touch on the e-Tron GT and the Soul, or
I'll hit those fairly quickly. The Soul, Kia actually launched two vehicles here. One is the Soul, which is all new, as well as the Nero EV, which is the battery electric version of the Nero. Interestingly, the Soul will be available in three variants. The X line, which has a 1.6 liter naturally aspirated engine. The S line, which has the same 2 liter or 1.6 liter turbo that you'll find in cars like the Veloster Turbo and some of the other more performance oriented Kias and Hyundais. With 200 horsepower, and then also a new Soul EV. So there's been a Soul EV available in California and a handful of other states for a few years now, and it was really good. It was surprisingly efficient. Had decent range. It would easily go over 100 miles on a charge, even with like only a 27 kilowatt hour battery. But the new Soul EV is getting the same 64 kilowatt hour battery and the same 200 horsepower electric motor that's in the Kona EV, as well as in the Nero EV. So, the Soul obviously is a little more interesting to look at, and it's kept largely the same profile as the first two generations of Soul, but much slimmer headlamps up front, a little more aggressive look. A little bit of change in the D-pillar. It's got, kind of the floating roof line type of thing now with the black trim separating the pillar from the roof. It looks pretty cool. But if you want something, and, it's about the same size, which is, the Soul's always been a good package. It's always been pretty fun to drive. But then you also have the Nero EV, which is a little bit longer. If you need more space in the back seat, if you're regularly carrying a couple of kids back there or some friends, you might prefer the Nero. It's a little less exciting visually, but it's a great package. It's a good size, lots of room inside, and they'll both be in the close to 250 mile range on a charge. And priced in the starting around 37,000 range. I think the Soul might be slightly cheaper. I'm not sure, but they'll be in the 37,000 range. So with the tax credit that's still available on those, you get it down under $30,000, which would be a pretty nice package.
Yeah, the Kia, the Soul is just one of my favorite cars ever. And I love that they continue to tweak it and refine it too. All-wheel drive with EV, like it just, or no, does the Soul not have all-wheel drive? I think that's one of the ones that I was thinking of.
Not with the EV.
Right.
And I don't think it does on the gas engine versions either. I don't think it ever has had all-wheel drive. I think it's always just been front drive.
Yeah, I think it has. So that's one of the things that I feel like it could just constantly use is all-wheel drive just to give it another selling point. But if it sells without needing it,
yeah,
that's fine. I drove a Soul all the way across Wisconsin and back in like a day and a half, and it was great. They tried to give me a Fiesta at first. I was like, nope. The Soul is just
it's a great package. It's fun to drive.
Right, Yeah. It doesn't make any pretenses. It's comfortable. All the stuff works in it. It's simple to figure out. I like it a lot. So I'm glad that they're making it better.
Yeah, no, it definitely looks like it's getting better. One thing, I was talking with James Bell, head of communications at Kia, yesterday or Thursday, and I asked him about actual availability, and one of the issues they've got, and this applies across all of the EVs from Hyundai and Kia, is battery supply. They've got limits on their battery capacity, battery supply right now, which is why when it launches here in the U.S., it will only be available in California and the other ZEV states. Once they get battery production increased, then they will start to make it available across the other states. But for now, only the states that actually mandate EVs will have it available. And they're also they're shipping more of the EVs to Europe as well, where there's more consumer demand for EVs than there is here in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, once we get some gigafactories and stuff online, we should have more supply than we know what to do with.
Yeah, right? Sure, whatever you say. then you still have to convince people to actually buy them, which is a non-trivial matter.
It's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
Batteries. That's something that there should be. I'm sure there is. There's just lots of R&D and investment going on in batteries to find that like battery equivalent of cold fusion.
Yeah, that would be the solid state cell, which may or may not ever show up. If you ask Henrik Fisker, it'll be here in 2020. But if you ask pretty much anybody else, it's more like 2030.
I don't understand the idea behind a solid state. So I don't know. It's not like batteries. Oh, I guess they aren't really solid state now. They're chemical. But how are you going to store a charge?
The difference with a solid state cell is that the current batteries use either a liquid or polymer electrolyte between the cathodes and anodes, and the electrons flow across that. A solid state cell uses a ceramic material, so it's actually solid as opposed to liquid or polymer, or gel. The polymer is more like a gel.
It uses a ceramic electrolyte or a
ceramic electrolyte. And the issue that from the conversations I've had with people working on solid state battery technology is that they can make cells that work. The problem is the ceramic has higher resistance than the liquid or polymer electrolytes, and so the power level is lower. And also manufacturing them at scale is still proving problematic. So, they can make the traditional style batteries, in large quantities without too much difficulty now, but the solid state ones are still problematic to manufacture. So that's why nobody's done it yet.
Huh. That'll be interesting to see that happen. I'm still confused about how you get the transfer of electrons efficiently out of ceramic. But
it's a different kind of ceramic material. It's not like anything you're used to seeing.
I'm thinking pottery.
Yeah, no, it's very different from that. It's not like clay. So some of the material science stuff that's going on in the battery world is pretty fascinating, but it's kind of beyond my level of expertise. So I don't want to dive in too deep and say stuff that is nonsense.
All right, well, let's move on.
Okay.
I'll say some nonsense about some other stuff.
All right. Audi e-Tron GT, last one I want to touch on from LA. This is basically the Porsche Taycan, and I got confirmation from somebody at Porsche. The correct pronunciation will be Taycan, as if it was spelled Taycon, not Taycan. So this is built on the same Taycan platform. It's roughly an A7 sized car, but with a 2-inch lower roofline. It's about an inch shorter overall. It looks like a tidier package. It's definitely more of a sports car than the A7. Which the roofline sweeps down a little faster. It's a little less bulbous looking in the back, a little sleeker looking. Really impressive looking car. And this will be one of 3 main EV platforms that we're going to see from the Volkswagen Group. So you've got the MEB platform, which is the front wheel drive stuff that the smaller vehicles, smaller to mid-sized vehicles that we see. That's the ID hatchback, the ID Buzz, the ID crossover, all of those vehicles and other variants from other VW Group brands are going to be on that one. Then there's this MLB Evo platform, which is used for the e-Tron Quattro that we saw in September, as well as for the upcoming e-Tron Sportback. And then what's currently known as the J1 platform, which was developed primarily by Porsche, and will be used for the Taycan and the Taycan Cross Turismo, as well as this e-Tron GT. And probably, I would guess, we'll probably see, like a Bentley or two off of this platform. The thing that's really different about this platform is this is an 800 volt architecture. So all the others are like 400 volt systems. As you start ramping up the voltage, you get much more efficiency in the system. So you get better energy efficiency. And it also supports 350 kilowatt charging. So you can, do an 80% charge in about 15 minutes. And this thing looks really hot. And considering that Porsche has said the Taycan will start somewhere around $85,000 to $90,000, presumably the Audi variant will be a bit less than that. So maybe in the $75,000 range to start. 590 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, and that 350 kilowatt charging. Be hard to complain much about this.
Well, that's the e-Tron Quattro is the one that they had that cool interior in, right? With the fabric versus sort of the standard kind of like leather and stuff that you see. That's what stuck out about that car to me, was just the design of it. It's a
that was
nice
more
design
that was the
exercise.
BMW iNext.
Was it? I thought there's an Audi I was looking at. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, I mean they've been playing around with different materials with Audi. Everybody's trying different materials. But the iNext is, that one's got some interesting stuff. They're building in, touch surfaces into the fabrics and, experimenting with all kinds of different interfaces. But we can talk about that some other time.
Yeah, we don't need to go into that now. I mean, I think that the e-Tron Quattro is just a great design exercise, and just being a visual creative person, that's what I come back to.
Well, the e-Tron Quattro is the crossover that we saw in September.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, apparently you don't like the design of it.
No, it's fine. But that one is kind of, it's a bit more conventional. It's similar to what you see with the Q7. It's like a slightly smaller Q7. Whereas the GT is kind of, I think, the way they described it is sort of the next generation of Audi design, going a little more extreme with some of the lines, a little more aggressive looking, smaller grille than what we've seen in recent years. So, and it's, certainly, in the GT, it's definitely designed to be a sleeker, sportier vehicle than the Quattro, which is a more of a mainstream premium crossover that happens to be electric.
Yeah, and if there's anything that we need more of, it's mainstream premium crossovers that happen to be electric.
Well, yeah, I
For
mean,
lots of money.
you're only going to have, the Teslas, the Audi, the Mercedes EQC, the BMW iNext, so, and presumably something from Ford and GM. So, yeah, no, I think we definitely need more.
Well, it'll at the very least it'll push battery technology, right? Because you're gonna have to get batteries to make all these things go.
Yeah. Well, that's assuming they can, again, find customers for these things.
Yeah, no, so I guess what I like about the e-Tron Quattro is, as a design exercise, is probably a lot of what I like about the Aviator too. Is like it's just classic proportions and just sort of very, very classy overall, and it's not trying to do like the Prius thing or even a Tesla where it's like, look how weird we are.
Yeah,
we're just solidly good looking.
Right. It's not trying to stand out as being an eco car or a green car, but it's standing out based just on pure aesthetics.
Yeah. So I like that, being a visual person, and electric cars are great.
Yeah, they are great to drive. If only they sounded like big V8s.
Well, they can. I see. That's an opportunity that they're missing, is the ability to select the powertrain sample that gets played over the in-car audio system when you accelerate. Right? They can just pipe it in with the audio system.
Yeah, well, we've heard how well that turned out with the BMW M5.
Well, I think it's just because they were sneaky about it, right? And they were like, no, we're just, and that's because people expect that level of noise in the interior, but there's also noise regulations on the outside that it has to pass. So BMW was trying to be clever, and they kind of out-clevered themselves. I think if you gave people the option to select the samples they wanted to hear and the level and all of that, give them some control over what it sounds like inside, people will take more ownership of it, and they won't feel like, hey, you're trying to pull a fast one.
Yeah.
That's my armchair psychologist.
Okay.
All right, speaking of psychology, GM offended everybody.
Pretty much, yeah.
Closing plants, yeah. They got to do it, though. Remember how everybody was offended when they went bankrupt? They're trying to not do that again.
Yeah, pretty much. GM has had more underutilized plants than any of its competitors here in North America in recent years, or at least in the last couple of years. And so, Mary Barra basically pulled the plug and said, okay, we're going to shut these down. We're going to cancel some of these vehicles. And others are going to live on, but just be manufactured somewhere else. So, they announced on Monday, just as a bunch of us were getting on a plane to Los Angeles, that they're shutting down, or let me rephrase that. They are deallocating the Oshawa, Ontario plant for GM Canada, the Detroit Hamtramck assembly plant, the Lordstown, Ohio assembly plant, and the transmission plants in Baltimore and Warren, Michigan. And what that means when they say deallocating, it means that the products that are currently being built there are going to be drawing to a close, will no longer be built at those plants. And right now, there are no new products assigned to those plants. The plants are not going to be scrapped or torn down, for at least not yet. They're going to be put into mothballs. And there is a potential, as new products come out, if there's demand, that they will bring those plants back online, building new products. And my guess is that we'll probably see at least one of either the Detroit Hamtramck or Lordstown factories come back online in the next couple of years. Probably not both, and almost certainly not the Oshawa plant. But for now, the plan is to continue, to just idle those plants and lay off the people that are working there. This is not the first time GM's done this, and actually brought a plant back. The Spring Hill, Tennessee plant was mothballed after 10 years ago, after GM canceled Saturn. They shut down the Saturn division, because that was the plant that originally was built for Saturn. And then a couple of years later, it was revived to build crossovers, and they build the Chevy Traverse and the GMC Acadia and some other crossovers at that plant now. And it's humming along nicely. And I would guess that at least one of the two U.S. assembly plants that's being closed will come back as GM starts to launch a bunch of these electric vehicles that they've promised over the next couple of years. Or perhaps, with, depending on how the sales of other crossovers go, they might shift something else in there. But that's the plan for now. Mary Barra wants to make sure that, she's making the hard decisions now to avoid being stuck with a lot of excess capacity, a couple of years from now or 5 years from now, and have to go through, begging for another bailout or bankruptcy again.
Yeah, and that doesn't change the issue that comes with a move like this. It sucks for the workers.
Oh, absolutely.
And,
I'm a union sympathizer. I'm with the workers, but you also got to understand that, you ultimately have to run a business, to be viable and sustainable for the long term. And, if you don't do that, then you end up going going under or going bankrupt, and you end up with the problems that, the GM had 10 years ago.
Yeah, where they were bailed out.
Yeah.
And so
take your pick. You can make the tough decisions now or have another bailout, later.
Well, what might be nice is if there's some sort of support for getting those workers some kind of retraining. And I don't mean programming, because not everybody can be a freaking programmer.
No, definitely not.
But, into some other kind of work that keeps them in their community. I mean, the other thing is, hey, move to where the jobs are. That's really hard when you're like in your late 40s and mid 50s. It's not necessarily a young workforce, the auto plant workforce. I'm sure there's some they're younger, from the the 20s into the 30s, but can they move them around to some other GM facilities? Can they get them into other job training programs? Can they find them places at suppliers? I mean, that's the other thing, where you got suppliers located near the plants, and the plants closed, so do the suppliers. So I don't know. It would be nice
some of the people that work at Detroit Hamtramck, could definitely end up being transferred to other plants, like Lansing or some other facilities. So there are possibilities, but absolutely, retraining, for new skills, is important, but it's tough to find the right, to get the right kind of training. What do you train these people for? Especially, like you say, if you want to keep them in their community and keep the community going, what can you bring in, and how can you train the employees, that are being laid off to do those new kinds of jobs? So
right.
you need to get both pieces of that, both the developing the skills, but also, getting something in place, that's more than just a boondoggle like the Foxconn factory in Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, it's just like this kind of industrial monoculture, where you've got, you're a factory town, and that can be great until the factory's gone, and then there's, you now you have this problem with people needing to work and not anything for them to do. So it's tough, and the Hamtramck plant too. There's a whole other backstory to that. That's just it's kind of annoying that they got that plant through in the early 80s the way they did, and now it's not good enough. Or it's
it's not so much that the plant itself is not good enough, but it's just that the products that are being built there, the Chevy Volt, the Buick LaCrosse, the Cadillac CT6, and what else? Oh, the Cadillac XTS, and the Impala are just not selling. They just can't sell enough of them. There's no demand for those vehicles, and so they need to shift over to vehicles that consumers actually want to buy.
Yeah. Well, I hope we're just in that lag period, and they sort it out, and whoever they can bring back, they bring back, and things don't look as bleak, but it's tough, especially right before Christmas. Great time.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, for the workers, yes, they're getting the news right before Christmas, but most of them most of the plants will continue in production through spring and summer of next year, so they're not immediately getting laid off.
Yeah. Well,
Although the same does not necessarily hold true for a lot of the salaried ranks, because GM as part of this, these changes, GM's also laying off a whole bunch of people from the salaried workforce, from engineering teams and other areas that where there's and management where there's simply too many people right now.
right, that's true. It's not just the hourly workers. It is salary people. It's cuts. GM. You can't let it get too big and not address it. Otherwise, yeah, we've seen the way that ends.
Before, so, we've already been down that road.
Yeah, I mean, and if anything, Mary Barra has shown that she's pretty prescient about what's going on, and it could be a harbinger of a larger economic issue that we're kind of on the cusp of. So I don't know. I hope that's not it either. But yeah, it just we'll pour one out for some of the factories for now.
And hope for the best for everybody in Lordstown and Detroit and Oshawa and Baltimore and Warren.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, that bleak note, because I can't speak anymore with any more authority about it. Maybe if somebody wants to come on the show, they can let us know, and we can have them come on. They can talk GM manufacturing. That'd be great, actually. But otherwise, I think we're good.
Yeah. Let's call it a wrap.
All right. Successful LA Auto Show. Next one up is what?
Detroit.
It's not Detroit.
Well, CES first and then Detroit.
Yeah. Right.
But that's not till next month. So I've got a few weeks to get my get myself mentally prepared for especially for CES. CES is always a zoo.
CES is like SEMA.
No, it's much worse than SEMA.
Okay.
Because at least SEMA, I haven't been to SEMA, but at least it's all, kind of confined to the Las Vegas Convention Center.
That's your
CES is scattered all over Las Vegas, up and down the entire length of the Las Vegas Strip. Every major hotel has suites, and every hotel's got their own convention facilities. So you've got the entire Las Vegas Convention Center, plus the Sands and the Wynn and the Bellagio and Mandalay Bay. It's insane.
That sounds terrible.
It is. It's horrible. And if I didn't have to do it for my job, there is no way I would ever go to Las Vegas ever again.
Yeah. Okay. I can definitely agree with that.
All right. If you like what you hear, tell your friends to listen to the show, and maybe drop a review in iTunes or somewhere where you can leave reviews for podcasts and help us grow the audience.
Yeah. All right. We'll catch everybody next week.
All right. Bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.